Let's move on to Benghazi for a second here, because UN Ambassador Susan Rice was on Capitol Hill yesterday. She met with several senators. Didn't appear to go as well as she had hoped, to say the least. You've been on the record, sir, saying that you would oppose her nomination, which hasn't come yet, but you would oppose her nomination as Secretary of State. You still feel that way?
I do. I believe that she has disqualified herself as Secretary of State by going on 5 Sunday shows 5 days after the attacks in Benghazi and truly giving bad information to the American people. As Secretary of State, we need somebody that has sound judgment, exactly. She just parroted information she was given. A Secretary of State needs to have sound judgment, ask tough questions, and should not be willing to just read talking points. You need to be thoughtful and ask the tough questions before speaking, and she just didn't do that. And to me, that disqualified her.
Senator John Barrasso, live this morning on the Hill. Senator, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ahead on Starting Point, can the U.S. permanently close Guantanamo Bay? A new report says yes. But is that a dangerous move?
And is criticism of UN Ambassador Susan Rice unfounded? Congressman Adam Schiff says we're losing sight of the real objective here in this whole investigation. He explains why. Coming up. When Susan Rice met with Republican senators this week, didn't exactly go very well. It seems like hearing from them a lot more questions than answers. So, if anything, her critics are digging in even harder against the idea of her becoming Secretary of State.
And she hasn't even been nominated yet. It's important to remember that in this whole discussion.
Yeah.
We want to bring in Congressman Adam Schiff, who's a Democrat from California. He's also a senior member on the House Intelligence Committee. We're going to get to Susan Rice in Benghazi, but I want to start with the fiscal cliff, because we're, 33 days away now, 15 days until you guys go on your Christmas break, so it's time to get to work here. And I want to start with the news overnight. Politico reporting that there really is the parameters of some kind of a deal here. And the Wall Street Journal says this, that the president may have some flexibility on the issue of the tax rate increase. President Barack Obama signaled he wouldn't insist tax rates on upper-income Americans rise to Clinton-era peaks as part of a deficit reduction deal. The White House's flexibility, first described by Democrat Erskine Bowles after meetings with Mr. Obama and others, and confirmed by administration officials, could even envision tax rates increase from their current levels, but less than the Clinton-era levels. Would that satisfy you if people making more than $250,000 a year had their rates increased not to 39.6%, but to say 37% or 38%? Is that enough for you?
Well, you know, I'd like to see the Bush tax cuts for the upper income go away completely. And I think what you're going to find with many people, myself included, is we don't want to negotiate against ourselves at the moment. But I do realize that there's going to have to be some give and take. This is going to have to be a compromise. Neither party can do this alone. So there are going to be pieces of this which I don't like. But frankly, those tax rates during the Clinton years were pretty prosperous years. I think the American people would be happy to go back to the kind of prosperity we enjoyed then. They obviously weren't a damper on the economy. And I think it fair that in this time when we're trying to pay down our deficit and debt that we go back to those rates.
Congressman, I understand not wanting to negotiate with yourselves, but you have to negotiate with somebody here. So yes or no? I mean, would you settle for something lower than 39.6%?
You know, I don't want to say what my line would be, frankly, but we are going to have to make compromises. And, you know, I think if the rates do come up, whether they have to come up to precisely where they were during the Clinton administration, that's something that can be the subject of negotiation.
And is there room for give on spending for you, say, on Medicare and other things? For instance, let me ask you specifically, would you support, if you had to, lowering the eligibility rate for Medicare, or raising it, rather, to 67 years?
I don't think we should make structural changes to Medicare for the reason that Medicare isn't responsible for our current deficit and debts. Neither is Social Security, and I think we ought to fix the problem that got us into this hole. You're right, Medicare and Social Security have some long-term fiscal challenges. They need to be dealt with. But I don't agree with connecting those to the immediate deficit and debt problem that wasn't created by those programs.
Congressman Schiff, this is Brooke Baldwin. I want to switch gears. As a senior member of the House Intelligence Committee, I want to talk to you about Benghazi. And so you penned this op-ed in roll call this morning. Let me just quote part of what you said. There should be a laser-like focus on going after those responsible, but in the blur of partisan wrangling over these talking points, we seem to have lost sight of this vital objective. Instead, some on Capitol Hill and elsewhere seem determined to go after another bright, courageous diplomat and champion of Libyan democracy, Ambassador Susan Rice. I want to talk about, finding those responsible, right? So the FBI isn't saying much in terms of findings. From what I know, that there are, 0 arrests, or we've heard 0 about any of these arrests. What can you tell us about these perpetrators here?
Well, I can tell you that we still have a lot more work to do, and the intelligence community is pursuing all of these leads. There's nothing that I want more, and I know this is true in the intelligence community, than to track down those that were responsible. And I think it has been a tremendous distraction, frankly, from that central focus of the mission to go through all of these peripheral fights. But we have a lot more work to do. We have some good insights into some of the folks that were present. But you have to separate conflicting reports of those taking credit who were not involved, those who didn't take credit who were involved, and we have a lot more work to do.
There's this one guy, Ali Ani Al-Harzi. So this is just one name that's been mentioned with regard to this investigation is being held in his native Tunisia. Can you tell us if the FBI has finally talked to him?
I can't, unfortunately, go into that level of specifics, but I can tell you we're trying to turn over every stone, every leaf to make sure that we bring these people to justice. And if I can make just one comment in rebuttal to your prior guest, I really think it's unfair and unjustified to go after the UN ambassador for not asking deeper questions or probing the intelligence that was given to her by the CIA. After all, let's not forget that the director of the CIA himself at the time, as well as the director of national intelligence, the top intelligence officials of the nation, both believed that when she went on the talk shows, they believed it began as a protest. Now, they were wrong, and the intelligence community was wrong, but I hardly think it's fair to suggest that the UN ambassador had better intelligence somehow than the head of the CIA and the head of the director of national intelligence.
For some reason, though, Congressman, Susan Rice on Capitol Hill is having a hard time convincing Republican senators of that point you just made. And yesterday she met with Susan Collins of Maine, who is considered a moderate. And after this meeting, Susan Collins essentially said she would have a hard time supporting Susan Rice if she's nominated as Secretary of State. To get her through as Secretary of State, you're going to need 5 Republican votes to get past a filibuster at 60. If you don't have Susan Collins, who are you going to get?
Well, hopefully we would have Susan Collins if the president does nominate the ambassador. Senator Collins hasn't said that she would oppose the nomination. She said that she wants more information. But, I have to agree with the White House that there isn't likely to be a change in the facts here. The facts are these talking points were produced by the intelligence community. They were amended by the intelligence community. They were flawed, and they were relied upon by the ambassador, and that's basically it. I have to think that this is unfortunately a continuation of the presidential campaign by other means. But the election has taken place. We should let that be. And many of these same senators who spoke loudly of President Bush's right to appoint the cabinet of his choice to remember those positions and not apply a different standard to a Democratic president.
All right, Congressman Adam Schiff from California, great to see you this morning. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.